Welcome to the Find My Catalyst podcast. We all have problems we're looking to solve, and we know that there are solutions out there, but we struggle with this. How do we find the solution? Where's the nudge come from to help us take the next step and start solving tough problems? This podcast is designed to help you find your catalyst and take that next step. I'm Mike Simmons. I'm the founder of Catalyst Sale. This episode is brought to you by the Catalyst Sale Game Plan. It's our approach to goal setting and execution. If you head to catalystsale.com/game, you can find out more information. I'm really excited to have Vince Fowler back on the podcast again. Vince is a CEO, performance coach, and friend. Vince, it is always good to see you. We just had a conversation the other day, and for context, when this goes live a couple of weeks from now, or even about a month and a half from now, we'll probably have had 2 or 3 other conversations between then and now. So how are you doing?
I am well, and that is the truth. All things are going very well.
Awesome. And we are going to talk about things that suck today, things that piss us off. And we'll start with, so this is not going to be a clean episode. There may be words that you don't want your kids listening to or hearing. You may need to have headphones on. We'll let you know that now, and we'll mark it in the podcast. But let's start with that. We were talking about marking this word as explicit. You said, hey, here's something that pisses me off. People who worry about
cussing,
the words, or worry about the cussing. Why does that piss you off?
It completely removes the belief that there's any kind of wisdom in this conversation. So David Goggins, for example.
Yeah.
This guy, if he's ever on a podcast, and I've only ever seen him on one podcast where he didn't use a single cuss word. But all the other ones, there's always a cuss word. Now, me being in the military and athletics, maybe I'm desensitized, but they don't bother me. Now, what probably bothers me is when people don't know how to swear well. Who doesn't know how to cuss well? But the fact that just because someone used a cuss word, there's this narrative, oh, that person's not very intelligent. They don't know how to be creative. Comedians take a lot of beating over this. Like the comedian that doesn't swear versus the comedian that does. I think comedy is hard no matter what you do. Just because there is or isn't a swear in there doesn't make it easier or harder. I think they both require creativity. But when someone just completely discounts the conversation because someone dropped the fucking F-bomb, I think, whoa, like, what about what they said? Oh, all I can hear is F this and F that. In the book, the famous philosopher Mark Manson, who wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, followed up by Everything is Fucked, a message about hope. What I love about his book is there's actually some legitimate wisdom in there. And many people will discount, especially The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. They'll say, there's 70, there's all these fucks in the first. Yeah, there's a lot of fucks in that book. But if you listen to the message, if you listen to the whole book, you will hear less and less and less. And you'll hear the stoicism, the wisdom, the life experiences that come out. Why does it, there's a thing by Salma Hayek, and then I'll shut up. Salma Hayek said, and I'm paraphrasing everything. She says, if it's the meaning we give a particular word. She says, if I'm swearing at you in my language, she's Spanish, right? If I swear at you in my language and you don't speak Spanish, you have no idea what I'm saying. In fact, you might even laugh. You might even think what I'm saying is funny, but you don't know what I'm saying. It's once you understand the word and you give that word meaning, all of a sudden it's your relationship with the words I used. It's my relationship with the words you used. So when someone says, you said this, well, that's on you. That's not on me. So let's just focus on what really matters. And anyways, pisses me off when people get all bitchy and grumpy about the odd cuss word somewhere. It just,
we curse and swear like sailors at the kitchen table. So the kids have always been around it. Now, kids aren't going to use the same language, at least not around us. I don't know that there's that level of comfort there, but think about it in an operating environment. There's a time and place for certain language and certain things that you're doing. But if we're going to work from foundation of authenticity and transparency and integrity,
yes,
and at the same time, we want to judge people for the words that they use because of some meaning that we've associated with those, what are we actually fucking doing?
Well, the key word in all of that for me was judgment.
Right.
Like
judgment
is a funny thing. Like, Mike, you look great today. I love the black shirt, man. That's a judgment. That's an appreciation for your selection in black t-shirts. Simon Cowell always wears white. Steve Jobs always wore black. Like Zuckerberg wears gray. But a compliment is equally as much of a judgment as a criticism about said behavior. So But it's the judgment in that the person speaking is somehow less than because they use this word or that word. And who gives a flying fiddler's fuck what they say? Because I could say a lot of stupid things without a single cuss word. And heaven forbid that means I'm intelligent, right?
Context matters, right?
Context matters. And yeah, in our house, like one time our kids used the word can't. And I think my daughter might have been 5 or 6. And it was, I can't do a push-up. So I said, pardon me. And this conversation continued. She might have been 6, maybe 7, but she's old enough to know the word fuck. And I said, Hayden, you can say pretty much any word you want in this house, including the word fuck, but you don't get to say can't. Can't, when we say can't, the brain stops looking for a solution. We are allowed to say, I can't do it yet. I can't do it without help, but I can't, period. Not acceptable choice of language. It is far more worse. So that's just the deal in our house. And both my wife, she actually swears more than I do.
Talking about language. So talking about language, though, there was a text message that we had going back and forth. I was running late to a call that we had scheduled. And I think I said, I'm a loser. I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot. Excuse me. Thank you for correcting me. I'm an idiot. I'm a loser, whatever. But there's an important thing that happens after you say those words. I am.
Yeah. It's identity. Say it enough times and it becomes an identity. It's easy for me to say, I am a man, I am a husband, I am a father. Those are biological and legal facts. But to say I am an idiot is like some people, oh, just kidding. The brain doesn't know the difference between kidding. It just hears I am an idiot and then behaves accordingly. So like choose our words. Like, I'm fucking awesome. I'd rather hear that come out of my own mouth than I'm an idiot or yours. Like, yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So let's talk about other things that piss us off. What's next on your list of things that piss you off?
There is no ROI in blank coaching. That could be business coaching. That could be life coaching. That could be wealth coaching. That could be health coaching. That insert blank. The one that pissed me off the other day is an industry colleague said, there's no ROI in life coaching. And this person is a hard and fast, I am a business coach identity, right? And what I love about Glennon Doyle, if anybody knows Glennon Doyle, look her up. She was on a podcast with Adam Grant. She's married to Abby Wambach, who played for the U.S. national women's soccer team. And Glennon was straight, had a husband, had kids. And then for all the reasons that she describes, she's now not married. And then she gets remarried. Now she went from a straight life to a gay life. And she was asked by Adam Grant, like, so who are you? Like, what's your identity? She goes, are you, and her response was amazing. It just said, with identity, you have rules, dogma, and an enemy. I said, isn't that interesting? Rules, like when I was in the army, I'm a soldier. Yes, there's rules, there's dogma. And the enemy is clearly Iran, Russia, China, as an example, during my time in the military. But, when someone says, I am a business coach and there's no ROI in a life coach, I was just like, really? Like what? Okay. Now, we used to be colleagues. So I was that guy that used to say the exact same thing until I was a complete asshole to a human who identified as a life coach. And I was being him, but to her, oh yeah, how do you measure ROI? How do you measure your ROI as a life coach? And it just meant that life was binary, ones and zeros, and positive or negatives on an income statement. I was clearly not thinking of all the other impacts. So a life coach might ask, someone's having a really shitty day at work, and a life coach might ask, well, tell me about that environment. And as we go through this question and this response, we might find that the person's environment is incredibly toxic or it's filled with a lot of sadness. Like we have a friend whose husband has stage 4 cancer, has less than 6 months to go. So how do you create an environment? How do you design an environment that supports you and your husband, you and your clients? That's not a quote business coachy question. That's a quote life coachy question. And when that person recognizes they need to redesign their environment to support the realities they want, well, look at them walk now. Look at them have a little spring in their step. Look at how they respond to others in their life. They're more compassionate. Maybe they're more, maybe they're more positive, or maybe they're just less negative. At any rate, there is an ROI. Just because it doesn't land on the income statement doesn't mean a blank coach has no ROI. Go fuck your hat.
Seriously, like think about what is happening on that other side. Actually,
this pisses me off.
I had a similar conversation with someone last week, and they had brought the piece around, really struggle to see the value of coaching or what the impact is of coaching. And you're kind of like, all right, So what you're saying is I get more value out of buying a car because I can turn the key and drive it. Okay. I can turn the key and drive it. Well, what if I could actually push that car to the limits of its capability because someone works with me to help me better understand how to drive that car?
Yeah, right.
Actually coaches me, not just trains me and puts a bunch of videos in front of people. What's now, does the ROI on that vehicle, that mechanical thing, start to change? Does your appreciation, does your perspective, do things start to shift? And this gets back into the judgment piece. So we judge because something is not like us. And all of a sudden, because something is not like us, it's an indictment on us and they're ultimately wrong. What kind of bullshit is that?
Oh my God. I watch Formula One and, I've counted 4 or 5 of those current 2022 F1 drivers that have performance coaches.
Okay.
And like Lewis Hamilton's performance coach, I think by trade, she's a physiotherapist. Daniel Ricciardo works with Michael Italiano. He started life off as a personal trainer. But in all cases, these people are there to help the driver process the agitation and stress that exists in their life, not in real time while they drive, but definitely outside of the car. And they use those experiences when they drive. Okay, so when you got passed and you failed to switch slicks to wets, Lando, and you got passed and you went from first place. This is Hungary last year, complete rainout. I believe it was Hungary. Anyway, not relevant. And I think he ends up in like 8th place or something. He was just gutted. So his coach spoke to him in a way that helped him process past decisions, past experiences, so that he hasn't made that mistake since. So now when someone says there is no ROI in X coach, my observation is that they probably had a coach and it didn't go well, which is fine. It's like dating. I had a girlfriend. It didn't go well. No shit. I had a marriage. It ended in divorce. It didn't go well. Do I just wipe women off the planet and not get married again? Like, it doesn't make sense. But I think it's a sense of our own personal, this is my guess. It's a sense of our own personal accountability. Life coaching didn't work for me. Therefore, it doesn't work for anyone, is one hypothesis. There's a $50 word for those who hate fucking swearing. Hypothesis. My hypothesis is that if you
just got very technical on us and very smart. Like, these are extra syllables. Now, remember, I went to Arizona State University. We do not use big words like that. I do understand the scientific method.
Oh, it's a great piss me off, by the way.
At a base level, what has, well, actually, I'm going to go next.
Yeah.
So what pisses me off is when people allow their preconceived notions to get in the way of growth. These biases.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more, man.
It drives me absolutely nuts. Whether it surfaces itself in the I can't instance, or it won't, or it doesn't. These preconceived notions, because they just happen to have a certain experience. And what they forget is everything is constantly changing. It might not have been the right fit at the right time. It doesn't mean that thing, that solution is not the right fit for something. I mean, like on the Jeep, got 5 lugs on it. I can put wheels and tires on that thing. I can put wheels and tires on the Pathfinder I used to have before. That Pathfinder had 6 lugs. I don't care how I'm going to adjust things. That 5 lug wheel is not going to fit on a 6 lug wheel unless I modify something. But if my preconceived notion is that 5 lug wheels suck, or coaching sucks, or work overcomplicating process, or whatever, this is not how it works here. It will limit the growth that you can create, not only for self as an individual, but for the others you interact with and the teams that they're a part of. So now your preconceived notions are limiting the growth that you can have as an organization because you can't get out of your own head. That pisses me off.
And to take that further, to discount the outside eyes. So I believe that if it's not 5 wheel nuts on my car and you come and tell me it's 6, no, it's 5, to completely discount that someone else outside of the organization could ever have a thoughtful idea to add value, Johari window, is absolutely ridiculous. If we can't solve it internally, well, it can't be solved. Really? Does
anybody, you wear glasses? We don't do video, so people won't see the video. But Vince wears glasses. I'm at the age where I should be wearing glasses. I've been into the eye doctor, and when the eye doctor holds that paddle at a certain point to the left or the right of my head, I can't see it.
Yeah.
It all of a sudden goes into a blind spot. And the only way to shift that blind spot is by changing my perspective. I can ask questions. I can shift my shoulders. I can change my head. I can shift perspective, and I can see things that are there that I'm not paying attention to because I'm overly focused on the mission, or I'm overly focused on the objective. So it's important, as much as we'll talk about things that piss us off, we're also going to hit on a couple of solutions. It's important that you shift your perspective, shift your focus, go in and out to determine, hey, maybe there is something I'm missing. Maybe I need to consider something a little bit differently. And Barry Diller talks about it in the context of a beginner's mind and infinite learning. Let's be infinite learners because things change. There was a point in time where when the Islanders won 4 Stanley Cups in a row, I thought, wow, this is just what the hockey team that I like does. They just keep winning those days. Cups. They haven't won a Stanley Cup since they won that 4th one in 1983.
Eyeglasses is a really great analogy because a friend of mine's an ice climber. And so he brings, 3 or 4 different sets of glasses to ice climb with, depending on the exposure of the sun, And if we have the right tinted lens on, we can see a lot more detail in the environment around us. And it's normal for athletes, baseball players, as an example, because they can wear eyeglasses while playing their sport. And football players have visors on their helmets. And obviously Formula One racers have visors on their helmets for different light going on. And so looking at life through a different lens absolutely can spotlight and disclose detail that we couldn't see otherwise. And whether it's, my glasses or your glasses or whatever, but it's this idea that I have all the answers and there's no value in outsider's perspective. Back to there's no ROI in a coach, or there's no ROI in an outside sales consultant, and so on. It's just ridiculous. The fact that they're unwilling, just because they had 4 bad experiences in a row, let's just say, that it's not worth a 5th. It goes to what, one of the things that I wrote down was, how you do everything is how you do one thing is how you do everything. Every time I hear that say from somebody, it triggers a piss off response, because Trevor Moawad, who, rest in peace, he died last year. He was Russell Wilson's performance coach, not to mention many, many other athletes. So Wilson's he's the quarterback for the Seahawks. He worked with Nick Saban. Now I live in Canada. I know very little about university football, but Nick Saban is this living legend of athletic football coaches down in the United States. And he had a belief that the past does not predict the future if the behavior changes. And as long as there's either self-awareness or the awareness of others, behavior will change. But we'll see someone behave in a certain way. Well, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And I think, no, that's not true. You would be wrong. Because if that were the case, I would still be the same person I was 30 years ago, 20 years ago. I've made some changes in my life just in the last month, and I do things differently. So let's stop pegging people for a one-size-fits-all experience through life, that they're just going to continually be this person. We have I think, as outsiders, we have a professional obligation to provide context and give perspective so that they can make change, so they can not behave the same way they were, assuming that's the area of change they want to have it in.
Camille Clemens, someone that I think we both know. Camille.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So Camille is a really big fan of how you do anything is how you do everything, and context again matters. So there is an approach, there's a method, a process that I use and that you use in the way that you interact with others, so that you can deliver consistent results. It doesn't mean, though, that at a detailed, granular level, that stuff is not going to change. It'll be directionally relevant from a waypoint perspective, but those waypoints can change too over time. And on the Nick Saban piece, one of the quotes that he focuses on, one of the things he focuses on is the very next play, the very next play,
yes.
the very next play.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is how you can move from just going fast around in circles to accelerate speed to impact, because that's the thing you can impact. And then once you impact it, Vince has a plane over his shoulder. It looks like a C-130.
Roger that.
Is that what they call it up in Canada?
That is
the same thing.
Yeah.
They call it something else different.
Yeah, isn't that C-130? Is it? I forget who manufactures C-130s. Is it Boeing or is
Boeing?
It,
yeah, Boeing.
Boeing. Yeah, it's a Boeing C-130.
Yep.
It's the primary delivery method of all paratroopers in Canadian operations, outside of like say a Griffin or a Chinook helicopter or Black Hawk. We don't have Black Hawks, but a Chinook helicopter is also, I believe, a Boeing aircraft. So yeah, anyways, carry on.
So when that thing is flying and all of a sudden a storm comes up, you may need to change the waypoint that you're going to go through because of X, Y, or, and I'll throw a Z out for you, but X, Y, or Z. You're going to have to figure out.
So what pisses me off is because people don't know. My mother is American. My father is Canadian. And I speak both American and Canadian, just so we're clear. You want me to say house? That's not an ass house you got. How do I?
All of a sudden you move to like you're now in the deep South. You're kind of working your way through.
How y'all doing? I sure love it down here. You sure got a whole lot of sunshine. Bless your heart.
So you see, there are a lot of people who will hear "bless your heart" and be offended because what "bless your heart" could also mean in the background is "go fuck yourself." So,
oh my! Little do I know. In Canada, that's nice. Oh yeah, that's nice. That's Canadian for "go fuck yourself." I don't give a shit. When we say sorry, we don't mean it. We are don't mean it. We're so passive aggressive, and that is my belief. We know we're not British. We know we're not American. We just don't know who we are. We just know who we're not.
There's another thing that pisses me off is passive aggressive. If you're going to be aggressive, be aggressive. Like,
so this is actually something I've worked through. I didn't know how to communicate through aggression. So by default, energy is energy and it flows through.
Okay.
So instead of being aggressive, because in rugby and in the army, I can punch people, but it's frowned upon off the rugby pitch. So by default, because I had no ability to communicate assertively through anger and frustration, by default, it came out passive aggressively. And so I can be compassionate for anyone who's passive aggressive. I will lean in and say, hey, I noticed that. Can we talk? Like, what's going on? So it requires a bit of curiosity and compassion, right? But yeah, like we live in a there's a lot of people in very high positions of power, presidents and prime ministers included, who behave very passive aggressively. And that just teaches everyone else that it's okay. Back to that, how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yeah.
Context matters again, because how I prepare for a rugby game is, and I did really well in rugby, is how I now prepare for an ultra run. And so I look, what's all the relevant data? What's the distance? How many calories is required? How much water is required? How much sodium electrolytes are required? Because I was built in the army to prepare for an operation, I use that same narrative in training to prepare and adjust and flex for a rugby game. And I played rugby at a high level. So that's exactly how I prepare and adjust and flex for an ultra. So how I do one thing is how I do everything. So there is some truth to this saying. It's when it's used as some sort of a negative, like, oh, so-and-so, look at their messy office. How you do one thing is how you do everything. Therefore, they're going to be messy with our account. I'm sorry. Say that. Repeat yourself, please, because I didn't fucking hear you.
Did you just drop it? I'm sorry.
I did. And I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it. That's
nice. All right. What else pisses you off?
Check. Okay. Absolutes. Hey, you want to learn how to sell, Mike? This is the way. This is the way to sell. Insert dogmatic bullshit thereafter. Now, I'm not saying it's not a way. I'm just saying it's not the way. It would be like me saying, hey, Mike, do you like eggs?
I do like eggs.
Okay. So the best way to enjoy eggs is sunny side up on top of sourdough toast with some avocado in the middle and a little bacon, like freshly made bacon bits sitting on top.
That might be one way to do it.
Mike,
I wouldn't say
if you're not eating eggs, like that's the best way to have eggs, Mike. Get with the program, Mike. Is that not the best way to have eggs?
It's not the best way.
Well, Mike, come on. Who has more experience eating eggs? I'm 52. So
but you do. You've got 4 some years on me. I'll turn 48.
See, there, it's the way, Mike. I've tried all the ways. And believe me,
I'm misguided.
Believe me, I've already tried all the ways, Mike. Just learn from me. Just understand. I already know
every one of the ways.
Oh my God. So this is the way. The 3 keys to success. If you're not doing these 3 things, you will not succeed in entrepreneurship. You know what? Go fuck your hat.
What the one that drives me nuts tied to this is I want to make sure we're doing everything possible to make sure this is successful. Oh, everything.
Everything. Eh? Absolutely everything.
Everything. That certainly sounds like clarity and focus. And also this ability to have a crystal ball and see into the future. We'll do the right things right now to put us on the best path to be successful.
But we've already tried every way. So how come we're not there yet?
So
It's those absolutes. Like, I mean, this is just a tiptoe into the political pool, but it's like all conservatives are this and all liberals are that and all Democrats are this and all whatever the other flavor is, I forget. But like every human offers value. They've chosen to wave a particular flag. They've chosen a side because there's just more that they relate to on that side. But that doesn't mean that person is somehow absent of value. And when we see this us versus them, don't trust Mike. He, he's a golfer. And you know what they say about golfers, right?
What do they say, Vince?
They only swing in one direction. I don't know what they say about golfers. I don't golf enough to know. But it's like we build labels. And maybe that's what really pisses me off is when we label someone. Ultimately, it's a fringe, it's a microaggression towards dehumanization. How to avoid asshole leaders is a horrible headline for any Inc. magazine, LinkedIn article. Someone had published this the other day that when a leader doesn't care about their team's feelings and emotions, they're not leaders, they're assholes. And I thought, whoa, dude, like I really respect this guy. And I think, dude, you work for one of the most globally iconic and recognizable leadership brands in the world. And you labeled a leader who is clearly not great at leadership an asshole. How is that helpful? Especially from a globally iconic leader brand yourself. So dehumanization, Barbara Corleroso, she's she's an American citizen. She spoke in Calgary at a TEDx event. She said, bullying is 3 steps to genocide. It's like, what? So bullying is having fun, causing someone else pain, leads to dehumanization. When we dehumanize somebody, Hitler did a really good job at this, called Jews vermin. And you can kill vermin. Like everyone connects the dots to killing vermin, killing cockroaches. Right. Rwanda, I forget Tutsis or Hutus, but one referred to the other as a cockroach. So again, it's so easy to kill it's so easy to kill something that's not human. And so when we can label NATO, we'll just say NATO, Canada, US, we call the Taliban savages. They are people who believe differently than us. They are people who believe differently and behave differently than us. I'm not saying I like their agenda, but I'm saying it's so much easier to kill something. And I was in the army. I was deployed to Somalia. But dehumanization in the playground, if we really think of it, it's next is persecution. I forgot the other one. And then violence, persecution, violence, and then genocide. It's that bloody close. And we see dehumanizing language come from teachers, from parents, from political leadership, from just look at most recently, Will Smith and Chris Rock, the dehumanization of either Will or Chris. Now there's less about Chris and a whole lot more about Will. Will is still a human being. Right. He made a mistake. He will spend the rest of his life, I believe, making up for that mistake, which is fine because he's a man of character. In that moment, he lacked character, but he behaved like an asshole. So if we could just stop labeling people, just because I have a firearm or I don't, doesn't mean I'm this or that.
Yeah, right. Like it becomes this whole idea. And who is it? Dunbar's number, the whole idea of the number of people that you can have in a community before
Dunbar's law, 150, roughly
150. So then what ends up happening? Well, what people do is they start to grab another identity and they move into another area. And then that group now becomes the out group relative to the original group. The out group is now the in group for the new people relative to the old out group. And we've got to come up and we've got to build these walls and build these ideas so that we come together as a community, so that we feel confident in the work that we're doing. But the challenge that and this goes back to the first thing that we were talking about, which is judgment, is we then judge others rather than just focusing on self and house and community and building out. We worry about what other people are doing with those labels rather than taking care of the stuff that we've got to take care of ourselves and thinking about what kind of positive impact that can actually have on the world if we're a good human. We make an impact on others. So it's, this labeling is a challenge, but also believe it's because we want to belong.
Right.
Like if I throw on an Islanders jersey, that's going to tell you something about me. If you're walking around in a Flames,
Calgary Flames, never. Yes. So
if you're walking around,
I do have a Flames jersey,
in a Flames jersey or a Flames hat, that's going to tell me something out. Now, the other thing it's going to tell me is, hey, we're both potentially hockey fans, so we've got some commonality. Right. But when our teams are playing each other, then we're going to have
Flames
more attention. Yeah.
It's this such a beautiful example because every single listener can relate to a sports rivalry. And I love sports rivalries. It brings out some really great energy. It can also bring out some really ugly energy, like we saw in the UK, I think about 6 months ago, where players had to be escorted. I think England had lost the World Cup soccer.
They lost there was a championship game that they lost. They were all talking about how it's coming home, and it didn't make it home.
And a lot of the England fans and world fans of England put a lot of blame on a couple of players. And guess what? Those players were black. Right. And all of a sudden it's their fault. Are you freaking kidding me? So we talked about this judgment and identity. And when Glennon Doyle says when we have an identity, you're an Islander fan, I'm a Flames fan, you're in the Flames building, there's rules and there's dogma and there's this enemy. Well, as a veteran, I was like, this was only a year ago. I was still in therapy and I came to my therapist and I said, you know what? I was in the operational stress injury clinic. They specifically work with military veterans here in Canada. And I said in a session, I basically started the session. I said, I no longer identify as a military veteran. And I could see her wheels grind. And she's like, tell me more. Because in the beginning, I was like, I am not a veteran. I am not worthy of this treatment. I'm not worthy of this healthcare. I am a fraud. I am all these. But now I'm like, you know what? I feel great because I'm not a veteran. And here's what I mean. As a veteran, there is rules and there's dogma and there's a couple of veterans communities I'm very familiar with and intimate with. And you know who the enemy is, or the largest enemy of the Canadian military veterans community is? The government. When I was deployed to Somalia, we used an experimental anti-malaria medication drug. Okay. We were the first humans on the planet to use it. And then soon after us was the Brits and then the Americans and then everybody else in NATO for the century. But the data started coming back saying this stuff's pretty nasty. It has some horrific side effects, which I absolutely experienced. And now in Canada and many countries around the world, it's settled in the US, I believe. But in Canada, there is currently a class action lawsuit because the medical company disclosed the negative impacts of this drug, methylquin. Lariam is its other counter name. And the drug company disclosed the side effects to the military. The military and the government did not disclose this information to the deployed unit, my unit, from my commanding officer on way down, as far as we know. Okay. It was just, hey, here's an anti-malaria pill. You just take it once instead of the Americans who have to take something every single day. This will be much easier. We called them Jacob's Ladder pills. If anyone's familiar with the movie Jacob's Ladder, they fucked us up like the most vivid nightmares. So much so that I was afraid to go to sleep. I was taking 5 to 7 Gravol pills just to get past the fear of falling asleep a night. 5 to 7 Gravol pills a night. So that's how I self-medicated to get through sleep. But for as long as I identify as this veteran, and yes, legally I get it on paper and my pension, I'm a veteran and I get it, but for benefits and such. However, having said that, I don't walk around saying I am a veteran because then the enemy has to be, according to my veteran peers, I must vote against the Liberals. I must join this class action lawsuit. I must. And if I don't, what kind of veteran are you? Go fuck, like all of a sudden you hate me. And I'm like, what? So I just say, you know what? I experienced the military. I spent 7 years in the military. I got deployed. I hung out with some really cool people, did some really cool things, learned a lot, failed a lot. And it's a big part of who I am. It's a part of who I am. It's not who I am. So swinging back to labels, like labels, it can serve us. I'm a Calgary Flame, go home team. I'm putting on my Flames jersey and I walk into the Saddle Dome and here come your New York Islanders. Is that what's their name again? The New York what's?
The Islanders. Yep. Islanders.
Do they have is that a hockey team? Is that a real hockey team?
It is a real hockey team. They haven't won a cup since '83. I
don't think we've won a cup since much earlier.
And they're not in the playoffs this year.
Historically, the Flames shit the bed in the first round. So I don't know.
So we create these labels and there's benefit to it, but there's also danger. And like everything else, there's two sides of the coin. So we've got to be able to identify where that balance is. And it's good to come together. And what I firmly believe is if you ask this question of people, do you want to create an environment where your kids feel safe coming home? Most people who have kids would say yes. Do you want to create an environment where your family and friends feel comfortable coming together? Most people would say yes. So there are things that we can align on. There are absolutely things where we have differences. And one of the challenges that I think happens inside organizations is when you don't have that alignment, you create this tension and you start to create in-group versus out-group. And we see it on the sales side where people are like, well, there's the salespeople. All they're worried about, let's label them. They're only worried about making money. That's what they're worried about. Well, here's a newsflash for all of you, all that, and that's a Southern thing, all y'all who think that that's what salespeople are focused on.
Yeah.
You know what? Salespeople are focused on helping their customers achieve their objectives. And as a result, they get fairly compensated for it. They're about helping people solve problems. It's a servant-driven role inside organizations. It is not the stereotypical, or at least not sales teams that I've worked with or that I work with. It is not the stereotypical, would you like fries with that? And even that's an okay thing because they're asking if someone would like fries. Do you want a floor mat with that? Or I'm going to put you through some high pressure situation that tells you that there's this high level of scarcity related to a vehicle not being available anymore. And you've got to make a decision today when the reality is, you know what? If you're a little bit patient, you can figure out a way to get that vehicle at some other point.
A friend owns a cafe and I'll buy a coffee. And I said to him one day, I said, they never ask me if I want a cookie or a muffin or a sandwich with that. I said, you've been talking to me about you're struggling for some revenue. And that's the fastest, easiest way to, the statistically, and maybe, you would know more than me, but like if we asked 10 people who just ordered a coffee, would you like a muffin, cookie, biscuit sandwich with that? What does the data say? The average person, how many people will say yes out of 10? Just
my guess would be 10 to 20%.
For sure. And what did it take? It just took the question, right? I don't want to come across salesy, he says. Whoa. And my context was, do you realize that as a business owner myself, if you didn't ask me, do I want a sandwich that, I would forget to eat because I was so hyper-focused on what my task was. Holy crap, it's 2:00 and I haven't eaten. Great. Thank you for asking. Yes, I'll have a sandwich and I'll have that yogurt parfait to wash it down with, right? Like one question just tripled the sale. And, I see this way more in Canada than the United States in that there's this fear of being perceived as salesy, whatever the hell that is. Yes, I think, the great philosopher Jocko Willink says this best. When I ask a question that helps you do you better, that's leadership. If I ask a question that benefits me, that's manipulation. If you ask that question, do you want a cookie with this coffee? That's not manipulation. That's helping me recognize and check in with self. Do I need it? And maybe, no, you know what? I don't need a coffee, but what I do need is I need a sandwich or vice versa, whatever the reality is. But let's stop projecting our fears on our client. And most organizations who have the opportunity to have offers, like here's an entry offer, second, third, fourth, and a tiered level, like a coffee is point of entry in a cafe. All right, what do you want with that? Like, don't decide for me. Maybe I don't want anything, and that's true. But at the same time, what if I do? Don't not ask the question because I'm going to walk into the 7-Eleven when I fill up with fuel and go buy a piece of garbage.
There's a right way
Snickers bar.
Yeah, there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. It's not, hey, now let's use the data that says that 10 to 20% of the people would say yes to a muffin. So now we're going to go ahead and include a muffin with every coffee, and you have to opt out of the muffin,
right,
which now means we're creating a lot of waste. It's a quick path to generating some revenue inside your business, but it's also a really fast way to create an experience that's not super exciting for your customers and lose the return visit. So it's not, right. There are a number of different ways.
You've been in sales for a while, haven't you? You're good. No, I'm not even being facetious here. There's a $50 word too. Two $50 words, hypothesis and facetious.
And just know that they came from the Canadian.
The Canadian. Who's half American?
Who's half American?
Like I don't like these negative opt out. Like I got to opt out. That puts all the work on my foot. Like just run your company accordingly. But yeah, I have no problem with someone. Do you want X with this? Like, don't decide for me. And if you come from a place of give a shit, like the best marketing strategy I think in the world is to give a shit. Just amplify your give a fuck factor and watch what happens next. Wouldn't that be a great company value? Our number one value is give a fuck.
That's it. Give a fuck. It's pretty clear. We give a fuck.
Kim Ferriss said, if it's not a hell yes, by default, it's a hell no. So if we say no, it's a hell no. But we give a fuck. So it's either a hell yes or a hell no.
What else pisses you off? What's the next thing on your list?
People who complain about stuff that's not in their control.
Wait, hold on.
Wait a minute. I just cared about something that's not in my control. But it's like when they come to me with all these, I work with people, amazing people, and they bring me these frustrations of theirs, and I'll just say, is that in your control or out of your control? And it's just the grounding question, right? Yeah, I appreciate that, how much that sucks. Let's ask ourselves, is it in our control or outside of our control? It's not that we can't be frustrated. It's the fact that what are we doing about it? Like we can't control the sun. We can't control the weather. We can't control the amount of snow for our ski hill and whatever else. So what can we do? And yes, there's an opportunity for empathy there, but it's this, it's this, when we're so busy talking about all the things that are way outside of our control, we're losing time and energy on focusing on what is in our control. And back to Trevor Moawad, while there's not a lot we can do to make the situation better, there are a lot of things that we can do to make the situation worse. So what is the next step? Just like Nick Saban, what is the next play? Just focus on the next play. The outcome is out of our control. All we control is what we do next.
Attitude and effort. Attitude and effort.
What we do, what we say, the process we manage, period.
Yeah. And there's so many different examples that you can go back to. Control the controllables, control what we control, the serenity prayer. Yet at the same time, we tend to over focus on those things that are outside of our control. And if you want to get into the detail here, just look at information around internal versus external locus of control. Do you believe that the world is just happening to you and woe is me and this cloud is following me all the way around? Or do you believe that you've got an opportunity to go out there and move, go out there and do something else? Another one that comes up is the fundamental error of attribution. When you're walking down the street and Vince and I are walking, I'm thinking about Nick Saban. Vince and I are walking down the street. I see Vince walk down, he trips over a hockey stick, I think klutz. I trip over the same hockey stick. I'm like, that damn stick. Hold on. Nothing is different there other than perspective and context. And, like control the controllables and know the difference.
So my first job coming out of the military, I sold photocopiers and fax machines. And I remember being in the bullpen where all the sales reps hang out at the end of the day or the end of the week.
Some people have no idea what a photocopier or a fax machine is these days. That's
how old I am, which means you should listen to me. This is the way. So we're in the bullpen and the sales manager's asking a few questions. Hey, so-and-so, I think his name was Stefan or Steve, but I remember this day, like it was yesterday, he said, did you close on X client? Which is another thing that pisses me off, closing, but we'll come back to that. Did you close X client? And he says, no, client X has a decision-making disorder. Well, I was so impressionable. I started using that excuse. And what the customer does or doesn't do, when someone kind of knocked it into me one day, he says to me, Vince, your customer buys for their reasons, not yours. And so if they're not buying, what does your sales process look like? If it's the wrong customer, then your sales process failed. You didn't discover enough. And all these things, like if the person doesn't buy, chances are it has a whole lot more to do with what I did or didn't do well in my sales process, my discovery phase, my business development process versus the customer situation. And so these excuses that people give where both sales rep and manager both buy into it, like own your shit. And back to close, me personally, Vince Fowler never wants to be closed. So if I was in a store thinking about buying something and I overheard the sales rep go around the corner and say, oh, got this guy over here, I'm totally going to close him today. You should see what he rolled in here on. He's wearing full Arc'teryx. This guy's rolling in dough. I'm not. No, dude. I am just a trophy on your cabinet, a notch in your bedpost. Disgusting.
It's absolutely disgusting. It triggers me as a piss me off when people look at sales reps as you've got to convince people. What does that mean? Convince. Yeah. Oh, that's what we do as sales professionals is how can I convince, or how can I get better at closing, or how can I close more, or what's your closing technique? And there's so much crap out there. You just go to the Glenn Ross movie where Alec Baldwin is up there saying, always be closing. And then Saturday Night Live does a really good skit on this, which is always be cobbling, and Coco is for closers. Nobody wants to be closed. But I can tell you this, people want to solve their problems. Like people want to feel good. They want to experience something. They want to change. They want to do something different. You can compel people to take action based on a vision of the future that you understand based on what has happened in that discovery piece that Vince is talking about. That's not closing. That's moving to the next logical step.
Yeah. And I think and again, their context matters. I would like to believe that the context of what's your close ratio is, we think of the sales process A through Z, let's say. And, what's the data tell us that when you strike up an initial conversation that leads to a discovery process, that leads to a solution provided, that leads to and so on, is what's the close ratio of your sales process, let's say. But to treat the customer as someone who needs to be closed. And so I've always said, we don't close a customer, we earn a customer. And again, I get processes have we want to close the loop on any particular file, any particular process. I get it. That makes sense. But when we separate the human factor from this, and I say we as people in society, and this comes from our biggest sales influencers out there, whoever they are, determined by them. Let's not forget that human beings were these feeling machines who think. We feel first, we think second. And to deny the fact that we're feeling machines, we're emotional beings first, and we think second, our earn ratio would exponentially increase if we always remembered that in this journey, there's another person. And back to, let's just give a fuck. Because what if my product's not great for them? I mean, I've met people, I appreciate you're looking for a coach. I'm not the right one. I care about you enough to say I'm not your solution.
The thing that pisses me off in the context of this is when people say the way to build your organization is through outside investment. That's the way. You go out there and you go through your A round, then your B round, then your C round, and that's the way. And then they come up with numbers modeled off some of those close rates to say that you have to hit these specific SaaS metrics in order to justify continued investment and continued valuation. And the question I would ask those organizations, are you focused on the metrics or are you focused on making an impact for your customers? And sometimes those are different, because the investor then now becomes your customer because you're hooked on the drug of the money that comes in rather than building your own capability. Now, I get there are multiple ways to do this, but know what game you're playing, know what direction you're going. Don't say, I'm focused on customer and making an impact inside the market, where at the same time, you're allowing your business to be driven by the metrics that an investor puts in front of you that says, here's what your close rate should be. This is what your LTV to CAC ratio should be. These are these metrics. Because, oh, by the way, those metrics that they're using for their rubric are the same ones they use across all of the other companies in their portfolio.
Yeah.
And not all of them are successful, but that's the model that they're going to measure you against. So do you want to be measured? You want to control the controllables or be controlled by those metrics? That absolutely pisses me off, Vince.
There's two sides to the data, and I don't know all the details of this story. It's true. It's during World War II. I think he's a Hungarian mathematician. He was Jewish, is Jewish, right? Not was Jewish. So he's a Jewish, Hungarian or Austrian or something, Eastern European mathematician. And obviously World War II, he's escaping that. He ends up working for the US War Department, and they're looking at all the bullet damage to the bombers coming back from these bombing runs based out of the UK into Germany. And so they're saying, here's all so they've extrapolated all this bullet damage onto this one single plane drawing. And this is where we got to armor up our planes. And he goes, no, we're looking at all the planes that did. It's called survivor bias.
Yeah,
we're looking at all the planes that returned. We're not looking at all the planes that didn't return. And I'm willing to believe that the area of this plane that doesn't have bullet holes is exactly where all the bullet holes do exist in the planes that did not return, such as engines, such as cockpit, such as a couple other pieces. And he was thankfully able to influence their thinking, and they armored up those pieces, and then their survivor rate of aircraft started to climb. But this absolute belief that this is the way, this must be the solution because I came up with it. And thankfully, they respected outside data, outside observation, outside perspective. There's last thing that pisses me off, because this ties into it, is the absence of curiosity. When someone is convinced that X is going on, Johnny Depp was 2 days after the op-ed piece came out, and I know jack about Johnny Depp and his wife. But what I do know is that Disney canceled his next movie in Pirates of the Caribbean 2 days after his ex-wife put out the op-ed. I didn't even speak to him or anybody. Just, oh, that happened, gone. No longer. In his own words, was he had spent years developing a character, contributing to the text and the script and so on, his own humor, his own jokes, like he invented this character. And 2 days after this op-ed comes out, they just drop Johnny Depp like a rock. Is this the over amplification of the Me Too movement? Yes, we all agree abuse is bullshit and we don't need it. However, the narrative, just like the bombers and the bullet holes, the narrative that only women are abused and not men. His mother beat on him like a rented mule. My mother beat on me like a rented mule. I married my mother, not the mother, but my first wife was essentially my mother, just less physically abusive, but equally as verbally abusive. And it just is what it is. And therefore, Johnny Depp married like me, very similarly, married his mom. Now, again, politics aside and celebrityism aside, when people make decisions without any curiosity, zero investigation, fuck, that pisses me off because you don't know. I don't have time to be upset at you because I'm too busy trying to figure out what was behind what you just said to me.
You don't know. Like, think about it. So it's okay to say, I don't know. But for whatever reason, we feel like we have to have an opinion, have a perspective, share the way, whatever it is. It's okay to say, I don't know. And it's actually super healthy to say, I don't know. Because when you say, I don't know, and the people around you feel comfortable with the I don't know component, then you start to work together as a team to help solve for the problem or open your perspective up to others rather than just reacting. And it's the Twain quote, and I'll butcher it because that's just what I do. But it's not the things I know that get me into trouble. It's the things that I know for sure that just aren't so that get me into trouble.
Yeah.
Something to that effect. And we'll have the real quote in there someplace, but you don't know. And if you take a beginner's mind approach and an infinite learning approach, a natural level of curiosity, genuine curiosity, it's amazing what can happen as your perspective starts to shift and the type of growth that can come as a result of it, which is why these questions are so important. And if we're in this loop of doing, we forget to pause and reflect and ask some of those questions and start assessing some of those things. It's a tough balance. And this is why we are better together rather than
for sure
alone running to something.
That was my wedding song, by the way. Jack Johnson, Better Together.
I don't know that I've ever heard it. So now
you got to Google it. You got to go listen to that song, Better Together, Jack Johnson.
I will Google it.
You're going to want to get married all over again, man.
This is the second conversation.
The song. It's the number one song. If you want to have a successful marriage, that must be your wedding song. Because if it's not, you clearly don't care about your spouse and your marriage will be doomed. It's the number one reason for marriage failure.
I thought it was The Gift. Isn't The Gift the best song? Because based on what I refer to affectionately as an eternity, but what has been a long time, Jen and I have been married since 1998, and the song was The Gift.
Stan Tatkin, who's very, very similar to John Gottman's work on relationships, he said, the longer we are married, the longer we become a burden to the other. And my wife and I went out for dinner Friday night, beautiful, like high-end steakhouse, just a beautiful, beautiful experience, from beginning to end, 9 times out of 10. But this time it wasn't a very beautiful experience for a variety of reasons. And, she's looking at me and she's like, and she gives me this, I'm really sorry about X. And I'm like, I know you're a burden. And then we both burst out laughing. It's our little humor antidote to anything stressful between us. And I said, you just happen to be the burden of the week. Trust me, I'm the burden next week because I'm getting ready for this 50K ultra. So, if we could take what pisses me off, my number one is the absence of curiosity. Out of all of these, what pisses me off, it would be the absence of curiosity. And I'm not saying we have to know everything. Colin Powell said, he's got the 40-70 rule. When we're going to make a big decision, you got to collect some data. At least 40% of the data we got to get or we jump the gun. But if we get more than 70, we're going to lose operational advantage. And so that statement alone requires a certain amount of curiosity. And so that is my number one piss off of this whole list I brought. How about you? What's your number one piss off?
My number one is the one that I went with early, which is the preconceived notion.
Yeah.
Which gets into this, which all builds on this, which is that whole idea of we certainly know. So since we know, this has to be true. And this is how we're going to go through it. And what we forget is there's a looping process as we learn. And, John Boyd does it in the OODA loop. And I think one of the pieces of negative feedback he gets on that is that when it's drawn up, it looks like a closed loop. It's not a closed loop. Yeah. It's a loop where the operating environment continues to progress. It continues to change. So, and the only time the loop actually closes and stops is when you're not there anymore. So
BlackBerry, Kodak, and Blockbuster if they could all go back in time, I wonder if they would exercise your wisdom and recognize their preconceived ideas as there's another way.
There's always another way. There's always another way. And at the same time, there's the way so that you can take action and play the next play. Yeah. Like if you continue to, this is why this stuff it's good to be pissed off about things. It's good to get excited about it. It demonstrates that we're human and that we care, and our give a fuck factor has increased. So Vince, awesome conversation. We've covered judgment. We've covered no ROI in coaching. We've covered preconceived notions. We've covered labels. We've covered a number of different things. Let's give people something positive, even though I think there were some positive arcs in here. Let's give some people a positive arc, maybe a positive question that they can ask right now so that they can move forward from either their preconceived notions, their assumptions that they have, their lack of curiosity. Let's do the lack of curiosity. What's a question that someone can ask so that they start to move toward being more curious?
The question I always ask myself is, what do I know about this issue from the other person's perspective? And that requires me to exercise additional curiosity. It requires me to let go of my own bias. It requires me to reach out to them. And in a very compassionate way, curious way, is to say, hey, look, there's some tension here. What do I not know? Tell me what you see. Tell me what you hear. Tell me what you're experiencing. And just imagine, so that's that piece. And I would just encourage anybody listening just to imagine the forward progress we could all make if we exercised that curiosity about the other person's experience, because it's so easy to just get on the blame train and blame police for this, blame Elon Musk for that, blame Trump, blame Biden, blame Trudeau, blaming is the easiest thing to do. I don't have to agree with their decisions, but at the very least, I can get curious as to maybe why they made it. Maybe I could be part of the solution instead of just being passive aggressive and laying down in front of the train tracks. Fuck you. Can I get a fuck yeah?
Get a fuck yeah. So fuck yeah.
You.
And on the other side of that coin, work on self-awareness. And Vince posed a question to me the last conversation we had, which is, who am I? Who am I? As we go through this process,
who is Mike Simmons?
Who are others? And look at the mirror and ask ourselves and really reflect on who am I? All of a sudden, you'll find yourself in a more curious mode. You will find yourself not being overcome by preconceived notions. You will actually get into a point where you start learning from different perspectives rather than just going out there to try to validate certain things, validate your own perspective, because you can go to Google and you will be able to validate that carnivore is the most amazing diet to lose body fat.
It's the diet.
You will be able to confirm that keto is the only way. You will be able to confirm that the gladiators, who were the most amazing athletes in the world, who were fighting life and death, lived off a vegan diet. You will be able to confirm whatever it is that you want to confirm. Confirmations of bias is
we see what we're looking for. We see what we're looking for.
Vince, where would you like to send people to learn more about what you're doing, connect with you directly? Where should we send them?
Go to vincefowler.ca because it's a horrible website and you'll realize, wow, this guy was so amazing and impressive on this podcast and his website sucks. So I can do it too. Okay. LinkedIn, if you want to see how I play in the sandbox, LinkedIn, I'm easy to find, Vince Fowler. And I play on Instagram. I did one video in 2 years on YouTube, but I'm probably going to do more because I got things to say. But absolutely, LinkedIn is one, Instagram's two, and maybe I'll get around to updating my website. I just don't give a shit. I give a shit about people. I'll care about my website later.
Vince, thanks for being a friend. We will include the links in the show notes so that people can connect up with you and find the one YouTube video. If you know somebody who would enjoy this conversation, share it with them. There are a number of different topics that we hit on that I am certain others of you are thinking about. Share it with them. Let Vince and I know both via LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, whatever social media group you use. Sales.
Give him a fucking heads up. There's a little swearing.
Yeah, give him, and absolutely give him a fucking heads up. Sales is a thinking process. Business is a thinking process. Life is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about your process?